Ethan Carter sat on the edge of his worn-out couch, staring at the flickering screen in front of him. The news anchor's voice was calm but firm as she read out the latest government decree. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't just another regulation about recycling or energy usage. It was something far stranger. Something that made no sense. Effective immediately, the anchor said. All displays of excessive cuteness are hereby prohibited under Section 23A of the National Behavioral Code. This includes, but is not limited to, unapproved laughter, smiling without proper authorization, and any behavior deemed overly endearing by public officials. Ethan blinked. He replayed the words in his mind, trying to make sense of them. Was this some kind of joke? A prank broadcast meant to entertain bored citizens? But no, the screen showed the official seal of the Central Governance Bureau. This was real. What does that even mean? He muttered aloud, scratching the back of his neck. His younger sister Lily looked up from her book. She was only 12, with big brown eyes and an infectious laugh that could brighten anyone's day. Cuteness? Like puppies and kittens? I guess, Ethan replied, though he wasn't sure himself. But they're talking about people, Lil. People being too cute. Lily tilted her head, confused. Too cute? How can someone be too cute? Ethan didn't have an answer for her. None of it made sense. Why would the government care if someone smiled too much or laughed too loud? What harm could a little joy possibly do? The next morning, Ethan left for work like usual. Sector 7B was one of the quieter districts in the city, filled with gray buildings and empty streets. Everything here seemed lifeless, drained of color and personality. Even the people moved mechanically, heads down, avoiding eye contact. Over the years, Ethan had grown used to the monotony, but today felt different. Today, there was tension, in the air. At the corner market, he saw 2 enforcement officers standing near the entrance. They wore black uniforms and carried scanners that beeped every time someone passed by. Ethan slowed his pace, watching as one of the officers stopped a young woman holding a bouquet of flowers. Her face lit up when she noticed him looking at the flowers, and she smiled shyly. That was all it took. One officer grabbed her arm while the other pulled out a tablet, typing furiously. The woman protested, her voice trembling, but they ignored her. Ethan turned away quickly, pretending not to see. His heart raced as he hurried toward the subway station. This couldn't be happening. Smiling was now illegal? Laughing could get you detained? What world was he living in? When he arrived at the engineering plant where he worked, things were eerily quiet. Normally, the break room buzzed with idle chatter and occasional jokes. Not today. Everyone kept to themselves, sipping coffee in silence. Ethan exchanged nods with a few co-workers but avoided conversation. He didn't want to risk saying the wrong thing or cracking a smile at the wrong moment. During lunch, he found himself thinking about Lily again. She was so full of energy, always giggling at silly things and making faces to cheer him up after a long day. Would she get into trouble for being herself? The thought made his stomach twist. After work, Ethan walked home faster than usual. As soon as he stepped inside, Lily greeted him with her usual enthusiasm. Hey, Ethan, guess what? I drew a picture of us. She held up a colorful sketch of the 2 of them standing hand in hand under a bright yellow sun. Ethan forced a weak smile, though his chest tightened. He wanted to tell her how amazing it was, how talented she was, but he hesitated. What if someone heard him praising her? Would that count as encouraging cuteness? Before he could say anything, a sharp knock came at the door. Ethan froze. Who could it be? No one ever visited unannounced anymore. Slowly, he opened the door to find 2 enforcement officers waiting outside. Their expressions were cold, unreadable. Good evening, sir, one of them said. We received a report of unauthorized laughter coming from this residence earlier today. Ethan's throat went dry. Unauthorized laughter? He glanced over his shoulder at Lily, who stood frozen behind him, clutching her drawing. Had she been laughing earlier? Of course she had. She laughed all the time. It was part of who she was. It must have been a mistake, Ethan said quickly. We haven't done anything wrong. The officers pushed past him without waiting for permission. One of them scanned the room, his device beeping softly. When it landed on Lily, the beeping grew louder. She shrank back, her eyes wide with fear. "This individual matches the profile," the officer announced. "Excessive emotional expression detected. She'll need to come with us for evaluation." "No!" Ethan shouted, stepping between them, and his sister. "You can't take her." "Sir, please step aside," the second officer warned, his hand resting on a stun baton. "Resistance will result in additional charges." Ethan clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. How could they treat a child like this? For what? Being happy? Being alive? But he knew he couldn't fight them. Not here. Not now. If he tried, they'd arrest him too, leaving Lily alone. Reluctantly, he stepped aside, his body shaking with rage. The officers grabbed Lily gently but firmly, guiding her toward the door. She looked back at him, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, don't let them take me." "I won't," he promised, though he didn't know how he'd keep that promise. "I'll fix this, Lil, I swear." As they led her away, Ethan sank to his knees, feeling powerless. The world outside might have gone mad, but he couldn't accept it. There had to be a way to fight back, to protect people like Lily who deserved to live freely. He didn't know where to start, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't sit idly by while the government stripped humanity of its soul. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan began searching online for answers. He scrolled through forums and message boards, looking for others who shared his outrage. Most posts were deleted or censored, but a few slipped through the cracks. One caught his attention, a thread titled, "The Resistance." Beneath it was a single line of text, "If you believe in freedom, follow the light." Ethan stared at the screen, unsure whether to trust it. But deep down, he knew he had no choice. If he wanted to save Lily, and everyone else like her, he had to take a stand. Whatever this resistance was, he needed to find out more. And so, with trembling hands, Ethan clicked the link. The link led Ethan to a page filled with cryptic messages and blurry images. At first, he thought it might be a trap. The government monitored everything, emails, calls, even social media posts. But desperation pushed him forward. He scrolled through the thread carefully, reading between the lines. It wasn't long before he found what he was looking for, a meeting time and location. Midnight. Abandoned subway station near the old library, the message read. Bring nothing but your courage. Ethan hesitated. Going out at night was risky, especially now that patrols were everywhere. Still, he couldn't just sit around doing nothing while Lily was locked away somewhere. If there was even a small chance this resistance could help him, he had to try. At 11:30, Ethan slipped out of his apartment. The streets were eerily quiet, lit only by dim orange streetlights. He kept to the shadows, avoiding the occasional drone that buzzed overhead. His heart pounded as he approached the subway station entrance. It was boarded up, but a faint light flickered from behind one of the cracks. He pushed aside a loose plank and stepped inside. The air smelled damp and stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. Ahead, he saw a group of people gathered around a makeshift table made of crates. They looked ordinary, men and women dressed in simple clothes, but their eyes burned. With determination, one of them noticed Ethan immediately. She was a young woman with short dark hair and sharp features. Her name was Mia Harper, though Ethan didn't know that yet. "You're late," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. "Sorry," Ethan replied, feeling out of place. "I wasn't sure if I should come." "Well, you're here now," Mia said. "That's what matters." She gestured for him to join the circle. "We don't have much time, so listen closely." As Ethan sat down, Mia began explaining the situation. She told him about Project Sternum, a secret initiative by the government to suppress human emotions. The ban on cuteness wasn't random. It was part of a larger plan to control society. By removing joy, laughter, and affection, the regime, hope to create obedient citizens who wouldn't question authority. They want us to live like machines, Mia said, her voice low but intense. No feelings, no connections, no humanity. And they'll do whatever it takes to make sure we comply. Ethan listened in stunned silence. He'd suspected the law was unfair, but hearing the full scope of the government's plans left him speechless. How could anyone think this was acceptable? "What can we do?" he asked finally. "For starters, we expose the truth," Mia replied. "If people knew what was really going on, they'd fight back. But getting that information isn't easy. We need someone brave enough to infiltrate the central governance hub and retrieve classified data." Ethan felt his stomach drop. Infiltrate the hub? That sounded impossible and dangerous. Before he could protest, another member of the group spoke up. "I'll go," said a tall man with messy blonde hair and glasses perched on his nose. "Name's Caleb Brooks. I've got experience with hacking systems." Mia nodded approvingly. "Good. You'll lead the tech side of things, but we'll also need someone on the ground. Someone who can blend in and handle unexpected situations." All eyes turned to Ethan. He shifted uncomfortably under their gaze. "Me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just an engineer. I don't know anything about breaking into secure facilities." "You don't have to be an expert," Mia said. "You just have to care enough to try. Think about your sister. Think about everyone else they've taken. Is sitting back and doing nothing really an option?" Her words hit home. Images of Lily flashed through Ethan's mind. Her bright smile, her endless curiosity, her unwavering belief that the world was still a good place. He couldn't let her down. Not again. "Okay," he said, surprising himself. "I'll do it." The group spent the next hour planning the mission. Caleb explained how they'd use forged IDs to gain access to the hub, while Mia outlined potential escape routes in case something went wrong. Ethan tried to absorb everything, though. His head spun with questions. What if they got caught? What if the data wasn't there? What if... His thoughts were interrupted when a new voice joined the conversation. A woman named Rachel Monroe stepped forward. She was quiet and reserved, with curly brown hair and soft eyes. Ethan hadn't noticed her earlier, but now she seemed eager to contribute. "I can help," Rachel said. "I used to work in medical research. If you find any files related to experiments, I can interpret them." Mia studied her for a moment before nodding. "All right, you're in." As the meeting wrapped up, Ethan lingered behind. He wanted to ask Mia more questions, but she was already busy organizing supplies for the mission. Instead, he found himself talking to Caleb. Do you think we actually stand a chance?" Ethan asked, trying to sound casual. Caleb smirked. "Honestly, probably not. But hey, worse things than dying for a cause you believe in, right?" Ethan didn't respond. He appreciated Caleb's confidence, but the idea of failure weighed heavily on him. Too many lives depended on this mission succeeding, including Lily's. On the way home, Ethan replayed the meeting in his mind. He felt a strange mix of fear and hope. For the first time since the anti-cuteness law was announced, he wasn't completely alone. There were others willing to fight back, willing to risk everything for a better future. But doubt lingered in the corners of his thoughts. Could they really trust each other? Everyone seemed genuine, but in a world where smiling could get you arrested, how could anyone truly know who to believe? When he reached his apartment, Ethan collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. Sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face, the fear in her eyes as the officers dragged her away. He clenched his fists, vowing silently to bring her back no matter the cost. The days leading up to the mission passed quickly. Ethan trained alongside Caleb, learning basic self-defense techniques and memorizing blueprints of the governance hub. Rachel helped too, teaching him how to identify important documents and extract key details. Despite her quiet demeanor, she proved invaluable to the team. Mia checked in regularly, updating them on patrol schedules and security protocols. Her leadership inspired confidence, though Ethan sometimes wondered how she stayed so calm under pressure. Did she ever feel scared? Doubtful? Or had she simply grown used to living on the edge? Finally, the night of the mission arrived. Ethan stood outside the subway station once more, this time surrounded by his teammates. They exchanged nervous glances but said little. Words weren't necessary. They all knew what was at stake. "Ready?" Mia asked, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Ethan took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." With that, they set off toward the governance hub, hearts pounding but resolve unshaken. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The governance hub loomed ahead like a fortress, its towering walls lined with cameras and blinking red lights. Ethan felt his stomach twist as he stared at the building. It was impossible not to feel small and insignificant standing in front of something so massive and intimidating. He glanced at Caleb, who was fiddling with a small device in his hands, muttering under his breath. "You sure this thing works?" Ethan asked quietly, nodding toward the gadget. Caleb smirked, though there was a flicker of nerves in his eyes. "Relax, man. I didn't spend 3 days coding this just for it to fail now." Ethan nodded but couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. The plan seemed straightforward enough on paper. Use forged IDs to get inside, locate the classified data, and get out before anyone noticed. But plans always sounded simpler before you actually had to carry them out. Mia stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "Remember, stick close and stay calm. One wrong move and we're done." Rachel adjusted the strap of her bag nervously. She hadn't said much since they left the subway station, but her hands trembled slightly as she checked the contents of her pack one last time. Ethan wanted to say something reassuring, but he wasn't sure what words would help. Instead, he focused on taking slow, steady breaths. As they approached the main entrance, Caleb held up the device. A soft beep signaled that the security cameras above them had been temporarily disabled. The group exchanged quick nods before stepping through the doors. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, filled with the faint hum of machinery. Rows of desks stretched across the lobby, occupied by workers typing silently on their computers. No one looked up as Ethan and his team walked past, blending in seamlessly thanks to their forged uniforms. Still, Ethan's heart raced with every step. What if someone noticed the slight tremor in his hands, or the way his eyes darted around too quickly? "This way," Mia whispered, leading them toward a set of elevators tucked in the far corner of the room. They piled into the elevator without drawing attention, and Caleb pressed the button for the restricted floor. As the doors slid shut, Ethan exhaled deeply, letting himself relax for half a second. Then the elevator jolted to life, and his nerves spiked again. When the doors opened, they were greeted by another checkpoint. 2 guards stood beside a scanner, inspecting each person who entered. Ethan swallowed hard as they approached. "IDs!" one of the guards barked, holding out his hand. Ethan hesitated for a split second before handing over his forged badge. Beside him, Caleb did the same, while Mia and Rachel followed suit. The guard scanned each ID carefully, his eyes narrowing as he studied the screen. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. If the fake IDs didn't hold up, they were finished. Finally, the guard grunted and waved them through. Ethan resisted the urge to sprint down the hallway as they moved deeper into the restricted area. His legs felt heavy, like they might give out at any moment, but he forced himself to keep walking steadily. "Almost there," Mia murmured, glancing at a map on her wristband. They reached a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Caleb knelt down and pulled out his hacking tool again. Within seconds, the lock clicked open and they slipped inside. The room beyond was dimly lit, filled with rows of servers humming softly. Screens displayed streams of data, scrolling too fast for Ethan to read. This was it. The place where the truth about Project Sternum was hidden. "Start looking," Mia instructed, her voice barely audible. "We don't have much time." Ethan moved to one of the terminals, his fingers hovering uncertainly over the keyboard. He wasn't used to breaking into secure systems. That was Caleb's job. But Caleb was busy working on another terminal nearby, his brow furrowed in concentration. Need help? Rachel asked softly, appearing at Ethan's side. He nodded gratefully. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. She leaned in, pointing to a specific folder on the screen. Look for anything labeled sternum or behavioral modification. That's probably what we're after. Together, they began sifting through files. Ethan's eyes darted across the screen, scanning titles and descriptions. Some of the documents were technical, full of jargon he didn't understand, but others sent chills down his spine. One file detailed experiments involving neural implants designed to suppress emotional responses. Another described genetic modifications, aimed at eradicating traits associated with excessive charm. This is insane, Ethan muttered, shaking his head. They're trying to turn people into robots. Rachel frowned, her expression grim. It's worse than that. They're destroying what makes us human. Before Ethan could respond, Caleb let out a triumphant whisper. Got it. Found the master file. He inserted a small drive into the terminal and began downloading the data. The process was agonizingly slow, each passing second stretching longer than the last. Ethan kept glancing at the door, half expecting guards to burst in at any moment. They'll be onto us soon, Mia warned, her voice tense. We need to wrap this up. Just as the download completed, an alarm blared overhead. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in a harsh glow. Ethan's heart sank. We've been made, Caleb shouted, yanking the drive from the terminal. Mia grabbed Ethan's arm. Move, now! They bolted for the door, racing back the way they came. Footsteps echoed behind them as security teams scrambled to intercept. Ethan's lungs burned as he pushed himself to run faster, adrenaline fueling his movements. At the checkpoint, the guards were already waiting. Mia raised her hand, firing a small EMP device that shorted out their scanners. Sparks flew as the guards stumbled back, giving the group just enough time to slip past. Split up, Mia ordered. Meet at the extraction point. Ethan didn't argue. He veered left, following Caleb down a narrow corridor. Behind them, shouts grew louder as pursuers closed in. His mind raced. How had they been caught? Had someone tipped off the guards? Or had the system detected the breach? Here! Caleb yelled, pulling open a maintenance hatch. Get in! Ethan hesitated, only for a second before climbing inside. The cramped space smelled of oil and metal, but it offered cover from the chaos outside. Caleb sealed the hatch behind them, plunging them into darkness. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. They listened intently as footsteps thundered past, fading into the distance. Ethan's chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath. That was too close, Caleb muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. Yeah, Ethan agreed, his voice shaky. But we got the data, right? Caleb patted the pocket where he'd stashed the drive. Let's hope it's worth it. They waited several minutes before emerging from the hatch. The building was quieter now, though distant alarms still rang out. Carefully, they retraced their steps toward the exit, avoiding patrols and sticking to shadowy corners. Outside, Ethan spotted Mia and Rachel waiting near a parked van. Relief washed over him as he realized they'd all made it out alive. For now. Did you get it? Mia asked urgently as they climbed into the vehicle. Caleb nodded, holding up the drive. Every bite. Mia started the engine, peeling away from the curb just as more guards spilled out of the building. Ethan slumped against the seat, exhaustion hitting him like a wave. For the first time since the mission began, he allowed himself to breathe. But even as the van sped off into the night, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The ease with which they'd been discovered nagged at him. Someone had betrayed them. He was sure of it. And until they figured out who, none of them were truly safe. The van rattled as it sped through the dark, deserted streets. Ethan sat in the back seat, clutching his knees tightly to his chest. His heart still pounded from the close call at the governance hub. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of red lights and heard the blaring alarms. He tried to focus on the fact that they'd escaped, that Caleb had managed to retrieve the data, but something gnawed at him, a feeling he couldn't quite shake. Mia drove with sharp, precise movements, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. She glanced occasionally at the rearview mirror, scanning for any signs of pursuit. So far, the road behind them remained empty, but she didn't relax. None of them did. "We need to lay low," Mia said finally, breaking the tense silence. "They'll be looking for us." Rachel nodded from the passenger seat, her face pale and drawn. "Do you think they know who we are?" "They will soon," Caleb replied grimly. "That system flagged us the moment we accessed the files. It's only a matter of time before they track us down." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. The weight of their situation pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. They'd risked everything to get the data, and now they were fugitives. But what bothered him most was the nagging suspicion that someone inside the group might have betrayed them. "You trust everyone here?" he blurted out, unable to hold back the question any longer. The van fell silent. Mia's grip tightened on the wheel and Caleb raised an eyebrow. Rachel turned slightly in her seat, her expression unreadable. "What are you saying, Ethan?" Mia asked carefully. "I'm just asking," Ethan said, his voice quieter now. "We got caught too easily. Someone must have tipped them off." Caleb snorted. "You're not wrong to wonder, but accusing one of us isn't going to help." "It's not about accusing," Ethan shot back. "It's about being careful. We can't afford to let our guard down." Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. "Look, I get why you're suspicious, I do. But if there's a traitor among us, they've already done their damage. Right now, we need to focus on staying alive." "She's right," Mia agreed. "Arguing won't solve anything. Let's get to safety first, then figure out what happened." Ethan didn't respond. He wanted to believe Rachel and Mia, but doubt lingered in the corners of his mind. Who could he trust? Everyone seemed sincere, but desperation made people do strange things. Even Rachel, who had been so helpful during the mission, felt like a mystery to him. She was new to the group after all. How much did they really know about her? By the time they reached the subway station, exhaustion had settled over them all. The old tunnels were dark and damp, but they offered some semblance of refuge. Mia led the way to their usual meeting spot, a hidden alcove filled with crates and blankets. It wasn't much, but it was home for now. "Let's review the plan," Mia said, setting down her bag. "We'll split up tomorrow morning. Caleb, you analyze the data. See if you can find anything useful. Ethan, you stay here and keep watch. Rachel and I will scout for supplies." Ethan opened his mouth to protest. He didn't want to sit around while others took risks, but thought better of it. Arguing wouldn't change anyone's mind, and he needed to prove himself trustworthy. As the others prepared to rest, Ethan stayed awake, staring into the shadows. His thoughts drifted to Lily. Was she safe? Had she eaten today? He clenched his fists, reminding himself why he was doing this. For her. For everyone like her who deserved to live without fear. Hours passed in uneasy quiet. Eventually, Rachel approached him, carrying a small canteen of water. She sat beside him, offering it wordlessly. Ethan hesitated before accepting. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said softly. "I can't," Ethan admitted. "Not until we know we're safe." Rachel nodded, her gaze distant. "I understand. Trust me, I do. But pushing yourself too hard won't help anyone." Ethan studied her profile, trying to read her expression. There was kindness in her eyes, but also sadness. Something deeper than just fatigue or fear. "You seem different tonight," he said cautiously. Rachel smiled faintly. "Maybe I am. Maybe I'm tired of pretending everything's okay when it's not." "What do you mean?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one else was listening. "I didn't join the resistance because I believed in freedom. Not at first anyway. I joined because they threatened my family, my little brother. He has epilepsy. If I don't cooperate, they'll stop his treatment." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "So you're working for them?" "No," Rachel snapped, her voice rising slightly before she lowered it again. "I'm not working for them, I swear. But I've been feeding them harmless information, things they already know, to keep my family safe. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." Ethan's stomach churned. This was it, the betrayal he'd suspected. But instead of anger, he felt pity. Rachel wasn't evil. She was trapped just like the rest of them. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because I can't keep lying," she whispered. "And because I don't think I can live with myself if I cause more harm." Before Ethan could respond, footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Mia appeared holding a lantern. "Everything okay here?" "Fine," Ethan said quickly, standing up. "Just talking." Mia eyed them both suspiciously but didn't press further. "Get some sleep, both of you. We've got a long day ahead." As Rachel walked away, Ethan watched her go, torn between relief and dread. He understood why she'd done what she'd done, but that didn't erase the danger they were in. If the government found out where they were hiding, none of them would survive. The next morning, tensions ran high. Caleb worked tirelessly on the stolen data, muttering to himself as lines of code scrolled across his screen. Rachel and Mia left early to gather supplies, leaving Ethan alone to keep watch. He paced the tunnel, his nerves stretched thin. Midway through the day, Mia returned, with grim news. "They're onto us," she said, dropping a bag of food onto the ground. "I saw patrols near the entrance. They're searching every corner of the city." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "How did they find us?" Mia shook her head. "I don't know, but we can't stay here." "What about the data?" Ethan asked, nodding toward Caleb. "He's almost done," Mia replied. "But we'll have to move fast." Just then, Rachel reappeared, her face pale. "There's more," she said hesitantly. "I overheard 2 officers talking. They know about the subway, tunnels. They're planning to raid this place tonight." Panic rippled through the group. Caleb slammed his laptop shut, shoving it into his bag. "We need to leave now." "No," Rachel said suddenly, stepping forward. "Let me go." Everyone turned to stare at her. "What are you talking about?" Mia demanded. "I'll distract them," Rachel explained. "I'll lead them away from here. You guys take the data and finish what we started." "That's suicide," Ethan protested. "It's the only way," Rachel insisted. "If I don't, they'll catch all of us. And if that happens, everything we've done will be for nothing." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mia stepped forward, placing a hand on Rachel's shoulder. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I owe you that much. Just promise me you'll succeed." Mia hesitated, then pulled Rachel into a tight hug. "Thank you." As Rachel disappeared into the darkness, Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. She was sacrificing herself to save them, to save the cause. He vowed silently to honor her bravery, no matter what came next. With their window of opportunity shrinking, the remaining members of the resistance packed up and fled the tunnels. They moved quickly, sticking to narrow alleys and abandoned buildings. Behind them, the sound of boots and shouting grew louder. The chase was on. But even as they ran, Ethan couldn't forget Rachel's final words, or the debt they owed her. The streets were a blur of shadows and flickering lights as Ethan, Mia, and Caleb darted through the city. Every step echoed loudly in the quiet night, each sound feeling like a beacon for the soldiers hunting them. Behind them, shouts grew louder, boots pounding against the pavement. They couldn't stop, not now, not ever. Mia led the way, her movements quick and deliberate. She knew these streets better than anyone else. Growing up in Sector 7B had taught her how to navigate its hidden corners, its forgotten alleys. But even she couldn't outrun an entire patrol forever. "We need to split up," Mia said sharply, glancing over her shoulder. "They'll catch all of us if we stay together." "No," Ethan protested immediately. "We're stronger as a group." "And dead if we don't move faster," Mia shot back. Her voice softened slightly. "Listen, I'll draw them away. You two take the data and head for the safe house, got it?" Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but Caleb interrupted. "She's right. We can't risk losing the drive." Before Ethan could respond, Mia turned on her heel and sprinted down a narrow side street. Within seconds, she was swallowed by the darkness. Ethan hesitated, torn between following her and obeying her orders. Caleb grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. "Come on," Caleb urged. "We don't have time to waste." Reluctantly, Ethan followed, his chest tight with guilt. Leaving Mia behind felt wrong, but he knew they couldn't afford to second-guess themselves. Not now. They reached the safe house, a crumbling old warehouse on the outskirts of the district, just as dawn began to break. The sky was painted, in shades of orange and pink, but neither of them stopped to appreciate the beauty. Inside, they barricaded the door and collapsed onto the dusty floor, gasping for air. Caleb pulled out the stolen drive and plugged it into his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he decrypted the files. Ethan watched silently, his mind racing. What had happened to Mia? Had Rachel managed to distract the patrols? Were either of them still alive? After what felt like hours, Caleb leaned back, his face pale. "You need to see this." Ethan scooted closer, peering at the screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. Rows of documents detailed horrifying experiments. Neural implants designed to suppress emotions. Genetic modifications aimed at eradicating traits associated with kindness or joy. There were photos of children hooked up to machines, their faces blank and lifeless. Notes described failed tests where subjects became catatonic or worse. "This is insane," Ethan whispered, shaking his head. "They're trying to erase everything that makes us human." "It gets worse," Caleb muttered, scrolling further. "Look at this." Another file outlined something called Project Sternum Phase 2. According to the document, the government planned to roll out mandatory treatments nationwide within months. Anyone who resisted would be detained indefinitely, or worse. "They're going to force this on everyone," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "No one will be safe." Caleb nodded grimly. "Which means we need to act fast. If we can expose this to the public, maybe people will rise up." "But how?" Ethan asked. "The government controls the media. They'll never let us broadcast anything." "We'll find a way," Caleb replied firmly. "We have to." As they debated their next move, the sound of footsteps outside startled them both. Ethan froze, his heart hammering in his chest. Had the patrols found them already? He grabbed a piece of pipe lying nearby, ready to defend himself if necessary. To their relief, it was Mia who pushed open the door. She looked exhausted, her clothes torn and her face streaked with dirt. But she was alive. "You're okay," Ethan breathed, lowering the pipe. "For now," Mia said, closing the door behind her. "But they're close. Too close." "What about Rachel?" Caleb asked cautiously. Mia shook her head. "I didn't see her. Either she succeeded in drawing them away or she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence." A heavy silence settled over the room. Ethan clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. So much had been sacrificed already. And for what? A few files on a drive? It didn't feel like enough. "We need to honor her," Ethan said, finally breaking the quiet. "Rachel gave us a chance. We can't waste it." Mia nodded, her expression hardening. "Then let's get to work. Caleb, upload the data to every network you can access. Use whatever channels are left unmonitored. Ethan, help me gather supplies. Once the truth is out, they'll come after us harder than before." For the rest of the day, they worked tirelessly. Caleb hacked into outdated communication systems, spreading the classified files far and wide. Ethan and Mia scoured the warehouse for anything useful: food, weapons, tools. They fortified the space as best they could, knowing it might not hold for long. By evening, the first signs of chaos began to ripple through the city. News outlets buzzed with reports of leaked documents exposing government experiments. People took to the streets, demanding answers. Some laughed openly in defiance of the anti-cuteness laws, while others held hands or hugged strangers in solidarity. But the regime wasn't about to surrender without a fight. Drones filled the skies, scanning for dissenters. Soldiers patrolled, neighborhoods arresting anyone caught disobeying the rules. The resistance sparked hope, but it also ignited violence. Back at the warehouse, Ethan stared at the glowing screen of Caleb's laptop. Lines of text scrolled past, detailing reactions from across the country. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags like Free to be Human and End Project Sternum. For the first time since the mission began, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. "It's working," he said softly. "Not yet," Mia cautioned. "This is just the beginning. The real battle hasn't even started." Ethan nodded, sobering quickly. She was right. Exposing the truth was only the first step. Now came the hard part: fighting for change. As night fell, the three of them huddled together, listening to the distant sounds of unrest. Shouts and laughter mingled with the hum of drones overhead. Hope and fear danced hand in hand, inseparable partners in the struggle for freedom. "We've done our part," Caleb said quietly. "Now it's up to them." "They'll need leaders," Mia added. "People to guide them, to keep them united." Ethan met her gaze, understanding dawning in his eyes. "That's us." Mia smiled faintly. "Yes, that's us." Exhaustion weighed heavily on all of them, but none dared to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But for now they sat together in the dim light, clinging to the fragile hope that humanity could reclaim its soul. And somewhere, deep inside, Ethan believed they might actually succeed.